Hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast of Body, Soul, and Spirit. I'm excited today because I want to just go on this journey of the topic and this word that I've been on this journey with that I think is so key and crucial and vital. Because I've been asking this question: why do some people grow while others do not grow? Why do some people stay the same? Why do some people never make the necessary changes, or they never evolve? They never transform. They almost got stuck on a previous page. You may see them like a year later and they just haven't really changed. They haven't really moved forward. They're just kind of in this state of stagnancy, if you will. And and why is that? So I've been on this journey because one of the things that I have seen um and found, I want to talk about this word called vulnerability. Think about that word vulnerability, and I found that that is key to growth. Being vulnerable is going to be key to your growth, to your it's detrimental to your growth. When I studied the word vulnerability, I studied it in the Latin, right? So that Latin word comes from the word valeri. And that word vulnerability means to wound. Think about that. So vulnerability means the capacity to be wounded. In other words, when you are vulnerable, you have the capacity to be wounded. Think about those words. A tree, right, is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's pause there for a moment. So if I'm vulnerable and you're vulnerable, then what you're doing is that you have capacity. That's what we're saying. If I allow myself to be vulnerable and have friendships again, if I allow myself to be vulnerable, right, what I'm doing is I have a capacity to be wounded again with no fear. And when we're not vulnerable, the opposite of that is you shut down emotionally. And so shutting down emotionally is only going to stop your growth. So what ends up happening is we usually have a tendency to shut down to protect ourselves. Most people are in protection mode. And when you have shut down and you're in protection mode because you've had betrayal, you've had people walk away, you don't really trust people, people have hurt you, right? Well, when we go in that mode of protecting ourselves, we cover ourselves. We're not very vulnerable with other people. We don't really show our true selves. What we're saying is, I don't have the capacity to be wounded anymore. Therefore, I must protect myself. So I've got to cover myself. But in order for you to develop and in order for you to grow, watch this, even in your brain, because physiological, we're going to learn through this podcast and the next, we're going to learn that your brain is actually growing, that your development, your development is it's necessary for you to be vulnerable to grow. So the reason why people get stuck and they don't grow and they got stagnant is because they no longer are vulnerable. They stopped trusting. They now started to shut down emotionally. They no longer want to show the real them. They don't want to be vulnerable. Now, have you ever felt vulnerable? And that feeling of vulnerability is really putting yourself out there again, right? It's like we can't help other people from hurting us. We can't avoid that. And so when you shut down, you're only hurting your own development. When you close yourself to others and you say, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm just going to start protecting myself, I'm going to just close myself up, but you can't grow there. What you have said is, I don't have the capacity for being wounded. I don't have it. Now, a person who's healthy that keeps growing understands that vulnerability is going to be needed. To be vulnerable means I understand somebody might hurt me again. And I have the capacity for that because I know how to heal. So, let me just say it like this: nothing will grow that is not vulnerable. Nothing. You will never grow when you are not vulnerable. Think about something soft, right? That's vulnerability. You're soft. A tree can never grow on hard and thick ground. It can't. It can only grow where there's softness and green. That's what vulnerability is that you're soft. Now think about any animal that's that's got crust, big, like a crab, for instance, the crustacean type of animal. It cannot grow as long as it's encased in a hard shell. So to grow and to be able to develop into the people that we were called to be, we have to be pliable. We have to be very moldable. And oftentimes life, because it throws all kinds of stuff our way, we end up covering ourselves to protect ourselves. Maybe you've been in protection mode for a long time and you're afraid to be vulnerable. Now, that's not to say you're going to trust everybody. That's not to say that you're going to expose yourself to everybody. That is unhealthy. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to allow yourself to develop relationships and even feel that vulnerability. And a lot of times people that have control issues have a hard time with vulnerability because you want to be in control. And so losing control is something that maybe you just can't take because you've been in protection mode for very, very long time. So we're going to go on this journey of vulnerability. I want you to get curious about that. Is that something that you have a hard time with? Can you allow yourself to become vulnerable? Think about this week and think about your relationships and think about yourself. What are you protecting yourself with? It could be pride. It could be fear. Are you protecting yourself by keeping a distance, by isolation? Are you protecting yourself by being in a fight or flight mode all the time? Are you protecting yourself by maybe a defense? You're on the defense all the time. And we're going to talk about that because that's affecting the development of even your own brain. And that's affecting, can you believe this, your own creativity. You will stifle creativity when you no longer grow. So we'll see you guys in part 2 on vulnerability.